Hi, I'm Frank and welcome to my woodturning channel. This week I'm going to try to make a very large square bowl. Basically the shape of this is going to end up like this, of course a lot larger. But this is the basic shape I'm going for, with a bowl shape near the bottom and then square wings. So the only challenge will be that this is, as you can see, quite large. We're talking, let's see how big it is. It's 19 inches square and 27 inches across the corners. So it's quite large, and I'm going to use the outboard attachment on my Laguna lathe because I have with the outboard I'm able to use the tailstock and just turn this a little safer. So let's see how that goes. The first thing I have to do is to find the center of this large piece. So I'm using my very large compass, as you can see there. I'm going to start this piece off by attaching a faceplate. Here you can see it's a fairly large faceplate. And I always like to pre-drill the holes before I put the screws in, just to make sure things don't crack or I don't break the screw off. I like this setup for very large pieces because on the outboard end of this lathe I can have tailstock support. This is Laguna 2436. First thing I'd like to do is to just flatten off all the sides. I'm just using a belt sander here. I went through a few grits to get it a nice fine sanding finish on all the edges. Now I've just marked for where the chuck will be. I'm going to use an internal mortise to hold the piece, and then I've also drawn a line to show where I think the very bottom of the piece will end up being, where it sits flat on a table. Now I'm going to use a 5/8 inch bowl gouge to slowly take away the corner edge of the piece and just work towards the finished size and dimensions that I want. I'll stop every once in a while and just check things. This is just a view from a different angle, and you can see here I'm just slowly working up to the shape that I'm ultimately after here. I can only go so fast because the piece is so large here, but on these kind of square bowls, the faster you can turn and have the speed going, I find the cleaner cut you get. You'll notice I'm wearing a golf glove. I don't often wear gloves when I'm turning, but the shavings are coming off here so fast and so hard that they're abrading my hand a little bit. But you'll notice that once I have a lot of the big stuff off, I won't use the glove anymore. This is now getting much closer to the shape that I'm after, with basically a bowl shape at the bottom, and then the wings kind of come out from that bowl shape. Here I'm just working on just the wings right at the moment. I'm just using a series of push cuts and pull cuts here, whatever works to get me the shape I'm after and give a clean cut. From this side view here, you can see that I still have quite a bit to go, but I'm working towards my ultimate shape. I've switched to a little bit smaller bowl gouge, just a 1/2 inch one, and just taking finer cuts, because at this point now it's very important to get a really good surface and not to get too much tear out. I also want to make sure for these final cuts that I have a nice sharp tool. Now I'm just going to use some pull cuts in along the joint here, just to get rid of these little lines. And then when I have this surface looking the way I want it, I'm just going to use a negative rake scraper in along here, and that'll just clean up any of these little lines that I still may have remaining on the piece. And that'll just minimize the amount of sanding I have to do. Now that I have the outside shape pretty well the way I want it, I'm going to just start working on the base. And this will be the foot where the bowl rests, and then I'll work on the mortise where the chuck is going to hold the piece as well. This is my final pass with a sharp tool, but because the piece is so large and the lathe is shaking a little bit because of the imbalance, I am getting a few little lines here and there. Good surface, but I got a few lines, so I'm just going to have to use a negative rake scraper against that surface again. Just here we go, just to get rid of some of these little lines that were left over. And here I've created a dovetail mortise for my chuck. And before I finish off, I'll bring the chuck right up to the surface just to make sure things fit. Yeah, that looks good. Now I'm just going to sand the entire back surface or bottom surface of this bowl. It's just a little easier to get at here rather than doing all of it at the end. After the sanding, it's time to take the piece off, take off the faceplate, and then remount it onto the chuck to work on the front face. So again, just to be safe, I've got tailstock support, and I'm just going to use my gouge to approach the thickness I'm looking for across the piece. So here basically I'm flattening it out just to get it a little bit more balanced so I can up my speed. And then I'm going to start working on the outer wings a little bit at a time. I'll approach this in stages, just doing a little bit at a time. And then when I have the surface the way I like it, I'll do a little bit of negative rake scraping, and then I won't go back to that surface again. That's looking pretty good. I'll just show you a side view. And here you can see that there's an even thickness for the amount I've finished. And I want that even thickness all the way across. So I'll just work at it a little bit at a time. And up to a certain point I can visualize it by seeing it. And then as I get deeper into the bowl, I'm going to have to use calipers to measure the thickness. You can see here now that I've got a fairly even thickness all the way across the entire surface here. And that's what I was looking for. As I get in a little further, I'm going to start to use the calipers to measure my thickness. And here I'm just making sure that where I cut into the bowl works out with the back side or bottom side, so that I cut in the correct spot to keep that thickness the same all the way through the bowl. Just takes a little bit of trial and error and measuring to finally get the thickness there just the way I want it, so it'll be consistent throughout the bowl. At this point now, it's just a matter of hogging out a lot of that wood on the inside here. And that's just what I'm doing, just taking a lot of it off. Here it is from a different angle. Now again, this is a very large piece, so I can only go so fast. I've actually shown this at 6 times the speed. And if it was a small piece, I could do it a lot faster, but with it being so big, I can only have it rotating so fast. Once I do my final cuts in this area, I don't want to go back to it again. So I've taken great care to get a really nice finish. And then I'm going to use my negative rake scraper to take out any little lines. And then I won't go back to the surface again. The surface here is so large that I can't really tell by eye whether it's sloping inwards or not. So I do have to check it every once in a while with a straight edge. And then I've got a large caliper that I can measure the bottom thickness. Here I'm now going to use a bottoming bowl gouge because the area is so flat across the bottom. These bottoming bowl gouges just give a little bit better surface finish on a flat surface like this. Now I can take the tailstock out of the way and just finish off this last little part in the middle. Now for some sanding. I can do most of it with the piece rotating, but I will have to do some stationary sanding on those outer wings. And I'm just going to run through the grit, starting from 120 grit up to probably just 320 grit on this piece. You can see the figure in the piece is pretty spectacular. This is ambrosia maple, soft maple. It's probably a red maple or a silver maple, something like that. But you can see the lines through it from the ambrosia beetle makes those lines in this kind of maple. There we go, the piece is all done now. And here's what it looks like. Nice large square piece. Next part of the process is just to apply some finish, and I'm just going to use my general salad bowl finish on this piece. Probably I put 3 coats on. So stay tuned for some final images of the finished piece. And thanks for watching if you stayed right until the very end. Off the lathe, I did draw a little tree image on the inside of this piece, just using my pen and ink pens.